Recorded on a computer. It's Saturday night. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to the Season 5 finale of Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hi, everybody.
And we're wrapping it up with another audience vote episode. This time the category was sketch variety shows. The options were Fridays, SCTV, and our winner by a overwhelming majority, Saturday Night Live.
That's right. The early years, the original cast, and that was the decisive winner, but I think there'd definitely be value in perhaps looking at one of the other two shows somewhere down the line. So
I think so.
We heard you, everybody that voted had good reasons, and I think Saturday Night Live may be one of the most talked about and written about shows in the history of television, all things considered, especially considering how long it's been on. But I think hopefully we can come at it with some different angles and kind of look at it from our overall show context. Mm-hmm. I think it'll be cool to talk about, and I have a certain fondness for these years of the show, even though I wasn't staying up until 11:30 to watch them when I was a toddler.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy this cast, and to me, this is Saturday Night Live, and I'm one of those people that will always consider this the peak of the show, and haven't done anything good in 20 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, I've seen some episodes from this era, or portions of it. Was it MTV that was running these for a while?
It was a lot of different places.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think MTV and Nick at Night was, and I think MTV was as well.
Okay. But they were like cut cut down, and so that's probably the first place I encountered the original cast when those were running. But it would have been around the same time I had started watching the show.
Yeah.
Which was the Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, Dennis Miller era. I was thinking because I think I have this feeling that people still venerate it in a way that is not equal to its actual position.
I think that's something we should talk about.
Both just as a comedy thing, but also as a cultural thing. Yeah. But then I was thinking about, well, when did I watch it? And pretty much from high school through, pretty steadily from high school through at least some of graduate school. So that's probably a good 10 years.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know. No, there was a pretty strong cast for a while there, and then it was sort of like the Adam Sandler period. And then I know I started to lose interest like that when Will Ferrell and that group of people came in. Mm-hmm. And most of the people from that I like now more from other things they've done. Like I like Will Ferrell now, but I didn't at the time, and there's some more recent cast members like Bill Hader that I just wasn't watching enough to appreciate him, and then I see him in things like Barry and Documentary now and being interviewed, and I'm like, oh, I like this guy, and I'll go back and watch some of his sketches, like his Vincent Price things and stuff, and I do like him a lot. But if I catch the show or catch a few sketches, I'll watch it, but it's not a destination for me anymore.
Yeah, I don't watch it anymore, but I think it'll always have disproportionate amount of media coverage and attention. Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's the kind of show, it seems to me like maybe it's a coastal kind of thing, because it seems like the entertainment media in particular, and people that follow comedy, whether it's criticizing it or talking about it, and especially in recent years with the heavy political slant and a lot of the coverage it gets for that, it seems like people are talking about it one way or another. I don't know, in the so-called flyover country, I mean, is this the kind of show is it really that talked about or that important?
I don't know. I mean, when I was in college, I was in Indiana, and lots of people were watching it. I mean, but that's college, where people are going to watch it. But it's hard to know. I don't want to necessarily stereotype any of those areas.
Right. Well,
it's easy to say it's an East Coast thing, but maybe or a coastal thing, but maybe people in the middle of America do watch it.
They may watch it, but do they really care about it as much? I guess what I'm coming at more the sense that maybe it's overrated by the coast, in the sense that, for example, in sports, they'll talk about East Coast bias, the Yankees and the Red Sox are ESPN will cover them, and it's kind of like this whole thing of the East Coast, whereas all this other stuff out there, like teams in the Midwest, or the Northwest don't get covered as much. And I'm kind of wondering if Saturday Night Live is sort of the equivalent of that, where it's been around so long, it's an institution, everybody sees it as important, and like within Hollywood, because it's so connected to everything and it's such an institution, that it gets a disproportionate amount of media attention from everybody just because of that. Whereas the rest of the country, it's watched because there's not a whole lot on 11:30, but maybe they would be fine not knowing, here's what happened on Saturday Night Live like every single week.
Yeah.
That being a thing.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I mean, I wonder, too, it seems like it's just because it's not, one, people aren't watching TV as much, but two, because they are putting half the show on YouTube, and that people can see what they need to see. So, like I said, I mean, often that's what I'll do. I'll just check out I'll read the title of a sketch and who's hosting it or whatever, and if that interests me, then I'll watch it. But I'm probably not going to spend an hour and a half watching the show. I guess it's just, people who read entertainment news might be interested in, I don't know, are those people only on the coast? Or maybe they are. And I'm sure people in the industry, obviously they're on the coast. But I'm not going to sell someone in Iowa short.
I'm not at all selling them short. I'm just thinking that they don't like it. I don't think they necessarily care about it.
Yeah,
I'm giving them credit, actually.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that maybe they don't obsess over it. I was more speaking to your point that maybe it's venerated a little bit more than it should be. And I think that's kind of going along with what I'm saying, that it always gets more attention and maybe always has.
Yeah.
And it just, negatively or positively, it's more underrated, and it's not the thing it was years ago, but it always will get some level of attention. But maybe it's smaller segments that we are more vocal and we hear about it more.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think because it's essentially the same structure show that they've had for a long time, although the episode we're going to talk about is, frankly, much more loosely structured, I think, than now, where okay, it's X amount of sketches and then music and then a couple sketches and then news and then a couple sketches and music and then that, like the last weird sketch. But so it's more like an institution in a way rather than the cutting edge.
Right.
But I also, just personally, because I have this, I don't even know where this is coming from, but like when you read, the oral history, or you read about some of the other, or hear about the comedy from especially the early period, like the idea that essentially all American comedy for a long time stemmed from this show and National Lampoon. It just kind of bugs me a little bit. I'm like, there are other kinds of funny.
Right.
Why was this so dominant? And I feel like we still some people give it that place and think that's the place comedy should come from.
Right.
That and the improv places that feed it. And I'm just like, well, why can't it come from somewhere else?
Yeah.
Why does this have to be the way to become a star?
It'll be interesting to see what happens. That Lorne Michaels has been producing it and in charge of it for 90% of its 40-some years.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see after he's gone what they do with it, and if NBC keeps it on and what format.
Right.
Right now, it's very formula shows, you mentioned, and it is like an institution. It's almost bigger than itself.
And the repeated characters and those.
Right. Well, that's another thing is, I think a lot of times, too, kind of going to your point, people criticize the new version of it or whatever version of it is, but the old one didn't necessarily not do that either. I mean, I think a lot of times there's a romanticized view of like past seasons, and for a lot of people, it's what they grew up on. Now, for me, the Not Ready for Primetime Players, the first 5 seasons before Lorne Michaels left and they did the massive cast changes, that is kind of what I grew up on, but I grew up on it in reruns. I remember watching the show. I remember the Eddie Murphy years, and even like Joe Piscopo. I remember watching that on Saturday nights. And then I remember Saturday Night's Main Event came along, of course, and I was more excited to see that than Saturday Night Live. But they also had reruns of it on New York television. They had the half hour, even then the cut down versions in syndication of those first 5 years.
Yeah.
So, and one thing I think about it that probably helped the show was you didn't see it like we watched it today in its context, and they came out on DVD, and every now and then over the years you'll have them, like NBC will even show like the original episodes in their original 90-minute format in that time slot. But it's a big advantage to any show, especially like a sketch comedy show like this, to take down 90 minutes of material with commercials and chop it up into 30 minutes where you're only seeing the best skits, and you're not seeing some of the real weird goofy stuff or some of the bad stuff that you might think. If you watch like all these years in their original form, you might think, you know what, the show is just kind of like it is now. Some of it was good and some of it was terrible. Yeah. I think for years, a lot of people watched them in reruns and they kind of remembered like the skits they saw over and over again and saw it in this like cut down version. Plus the fact that the show mythologizes itself so often. Every 5 years there's an anniversary special. There's best of collections and all this, and stuff gets circulated so people remember the best, as they do about any show that's been on the air 40 some years.
Yeah.
They'll remember the good stuff and kind of forget about some of the lowlights.
You were watching these reruns, but when did you even first become aware of the show?
Of like Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the reruns or the actual show itself, but it must have been like the early 80s. But I'm thinking I have pretty early memories of watching the show, like on, I think it was WOR showing the Saturday night reruns. And I think sometimes they were on weekends, like pretty late, but that half hour. And then like in the early days of Nick at Night, I think they were showing pretty heavily. They were showing Saturday Night, and they call it like Saturday Night.
Yeah,
it was kind of distinguished. So I would say, the early '80s. I mean, okay. I definitely remember the Eddie Murphy, like the Buckwheat sketch, or the Who Shot Buckwheat sketch.
Yeah,
and all his.
The Coneheads must have appeared somewhere off the show, because I remember the Coneheads from something. Maybe they showed up on the Muppet Show, or I don't know, Family Feud, or some other place. But like that era is when I remember hearing about it, not watching it, but kids at school talking about, just repeating a lot of the Buckwheat stuff.
Yeah,
specifically. But I certainly wasn't watching it until I was in high school.
Yeah, no, and plus the Blues Brothers was sort of spawned from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah,
and I remember my parents had the Blues Brothers, like the LPs, and
okay,
we would play those in the house. So that would kind of like, before I even knew that the movie was a thing, I remember listening to that album and hearing the Blues Brothers LP.
And I guess, Ghostbusters, that's early to mid 80s, right?
Yeah, it was like 84, I think.
84.
About that.
So I was aware that show existed and that some of those people had been on that show.
Yeah.
But I don't remember seeing it until later than that.
I think to me, like seeing it in the reruns, that sort of added to, like, there was definitely a mystique to it for me. And even in like those half-hour versions, it just seemed kind of, there's just something, like the look of it. It just sort of like, almost like grimy New York, and just the crudeness of it. And yeah, I think I probably grew up in, like, my relatives and parents talking about some of those old sketches.
Yeah.
And which would make me interested in seeing them when they rerun them or kind of watch them. So for me, I kind of grew up watching this particular set pretty early, and then watching like the Eddie Murphy and then the Billy Crystal and Christopher Guest year and Martin Short, that kind of thing. And I think for me it was probably high school and college where I would maybe start getting out of watching it. But I think as far as like, I think one thing we can talk, is the show, I think maybe there's a perception that the show is more cutting edge than it really was. In many ways, it's a lot more old-fashioned variety than I think people remember. But I also think, too, I think it's important to put the show in context. Like now, it's 11:30, you can watch whatever you want. But at the time, it was very new to put something like this on. And when I talked to like my parents about being around and being young and interested in maybe not that interested in television, not used to it, and like things like this and the midnight special, that was a big deal. That was like, okay, there's something late night TV and clearly aimed at younger people. And for that point alone, it was a pioneer in the sense that they weren't the first people to think of like, hey, let's put something on late night, let's put something on to appeal to younger kids, but they combined that and sort of had this edge of irreverence that I think really made it such an important show. And the fact that it's somehow managed to last as long as it has.
Right.
Each year, its reputation grows just because it's still around, I think.
Yeah. Like, what other shows have been on that long? Sesame Street?
60 Minutes?
60 Minutes. The Price is Right?
Yeah. Some of the soap operas, daytime
soap operas,
soaps.
Yeah. And that's about it.
Yeah. I mean, and this with like constantly rotating casts.
Yeah.
But more or less, it's in the same format as it was when it premiered in 1975.
Right, and I guess when it tries to reinvent itself, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But maybe that's because of other people. Well, in some cases, other people reinventing it.
Yeah, and I wonder about that. And every now and then, people will try to quote unquote take it on. I mean, they don't really try now, but over the years, you've had like shows like Fridays was an attempt to kind of get in on that. And even if you're not necessarily going up against it 11:30, you're going for that appeal. And doing sketches, doing some kind of variety, and doing younger
Right.
skewing comedy.
Yeah.
And even Lorne Michaels had the new show for a while that I think was in prime time actually, like in the early '80s. And
And Mad TV.
yeah. I guess Mad TV is a good. I mean, that was maybe one of the most successful
Yeah.
attempts. I mean, that was on for years on Saturday nights, right?
Yeah. That's right. It was.
That was one of the
Did
most
it-
direct competitors I guess it's ever had.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know it was only an hour, and I think I don't know if it started at the same time.
It might have been like 11 to midnight or something,
something
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could catch the best part of
Yeah.
SNL.
Right.
Actually, I do think those like super weird sketches at the end are often my favorite part.
Yeah.
Just because they're let loose a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm starting to wonder if that's. Well, again, I don't really watch the show very often, but I've
Yeah.
started to wonder, is that become more of a thing if it's kind of more contrived where they're doing that on purpose? Whereas in the past, it just seemed like there was a pecking order, and the lesser quality stuff would get kind of exiled back there. And now sometimes I wonder if they're just like, it just seems like more of a formula to me. Like let's
Yeah, I
put
don't
something
know.
like a one joke premise here, and
Because some of the things that have seemed to have done well, and some of them I've liked have been like that David S. Pumpkins thing with Tom Hanks is just super weird and kind of just an odd concept and built around just everything about it's weird.
Yeah.
And that wasn't into the show sketch. That was in the middle of the show.
And I think
So I give them credit for like whoever finally pulled the say, okay, we are going to go ahead and do this weirdo sketch, for not sticking it back there.
right. I think I appreciate more of that kind of thing too, and like I don't necessarily need to see, okay, let's come out and have one person do their hot political impersonation every week. Let's
Right.
have this recurring character every week or two. And that's the kind of thing I don't like about the show. However, they did do that in the original shows as well. They had recurring characters. They had impersonations. I don't think it was to the same level, though. I think they did mix it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's an enduring format.
And even that period when I started watching, as good as some of that cast was, they definitely exhausted. I mean, Dana Carvey was kind of maybe not by his choice, but he was the king of the recurring character.
Yeah.
Especially like when he was the only person left from that cast.
And they've talked about that, how, it's sort of a prison sometimes. It's also an opportunity, but if you're going to get on the air and you're going to get laughs with it,
Yeah.
it just makes it a lot easier when you're under a compressed schedule.
Right.
Because and it's the one thing everybody talks about, and the one thing that we're not really mentioning, but it does air live. I mean, there is a delay, but they're doing this live every week at Saturday. And just for that, doing a live entertainment show.
And putting it all together in a week. I mean, all of that's impressive, and it sounds also like insane.
Yeah.
Just the way he manages it and the way.
I think people take that for granted.
Yeah.
Even today, it's not easy to do that.
No.
And
your batting average can't be 1,000 when you're
like in the 50s,
doing that.
In the early days of television, you were doing everything live. But now I kind of respect the fact that they've kept it live, and it gives it that spontaneity. And I think that is another thing that distinguishes it from so many other shows. And some of the ones we've mentioned, Friday's SCTV, Mad TV, they were taped, had the benefit of post-production. I think that's another thing we could. Another thing Saturday Night Live has done more, I think, in recent years is relying on videotape pieces, things that they want to go viral and like content. Again, that's something else they did from the early days,
Right?
And even some of the early episodes where they're like in the first season where they were still trying to find their format. They always relied on that, but to me, I prefer like there's just more of that spontaneous feeling when they're doing the live sketches.
It is nice, and you feel that if you watch like a late night talk show, and those are like super edited now.
Yeah,
and you can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you don't. Even if something goes wrong, maybe we talked about that a little bit with Letterman. They do let things go wrong on the late night shows. Some, but SNL more likely something will go wrong, and there's nothing you can do. But somebody's going to laugh, or somebody, whatever, a prop's going to fall, something, and they're going to have to deal with it.
And also another aspect of it is the music, and I think especially when it debuted, that was a big part of it. Like, and it's funny again, if you go back, there's some little contradictions here and there. You see like the lineup of musical guests; they weren't always as hip as you maybe think they were, but many of them were, and they were giving form to acts that weren't on TV otherwise.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people weren't seeing live bands playing live on television, so that's kind of another maybe sometimes underrated aspect of Saturday Night Live's legacy is the musical guest. Almost always does 2 numbers per show.
Right.
And that's probably another reason why I don't watch the show as much anymore. For one thing, it's not as big a deal to see music on TV, and for another, I'm just not as connected to the current music, so I don't care. So
Yeah.
if somebody's going to be on there that I like, that would be something like, well, I definitely would watch that on YouTube or something.
Right. And you get the thing now, even with not big artists, but sometimes like indie artists, this is not a thing particular to SNL, but there are so many places for them to go play that you can find 5 YouTube videos of them playing the same 2 songs because, you're playing your single or whatever. So maybe it's not as exciting.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not plugged into what's going on in contemporary music right now. So I'm not always as interested in that.
And I don't think the music on the show makes headlines the way it used to. I think even like in the 80s and into the 90s, not just because of incidents like, Ashley Simpson lip syncing or Sinead O'Connor tearing up the Pope's picture.
Right.
But it seemed to me like it would be a bigger deal, and I guess just kind of a way that entertainment has gone and television music industries have gone. But I don't see a lot of like reputations being made or people wowing people on Saturday Night Live anymore or impressing people. I guess a lot of times they've already had their chance to do it, and maybe they've already done it.
Yeah.
Whereas, again, maybe it's just my bias, but there's just so many like memorable musical performances from years past that I don't know if you get that anymore. Maybe you do.
Every now and then, I think Donald Glover got some buzz when he hosted. I mean, because he hosted and he did some songs, and one was that one that he had a video for a few days later that was strange and political. But I think the video got more buzz because it had more to it. But he debuted it there. But yeah, not always. I learned, I mentioned it before, but on the NBC tour that if musical acts want to have like staging, like set pieces and stuff beyond just what's on the stage already, that they have to pay for that themselves. As it was a budget saving move.
That's interesting.
So they have to bring in their lasers or whatever.
Right. I think maybe even down the road on the podcast we could even talk more specifically about different eras. I mean, this show, there's so many distinct eras.
Yeah.
That lends itself to that, and I would love to talk about some of the more obscure episodes. Right now, those are harder to find. The first 5 seasons came out on DVD years ago, and it was a really big deal because of all the music, all the clearances.
Yeah.
They came through largely intact, and you can still find those on Hulu. Most of the other years, though, they haven't bothered to do the clearances, and for some reason they can't show them apparently, or they won't in that original form either. So like when Comedy Central or somebody shows reruns of like the 80s, there'll be edited down versions. And I got excited when the streaming service CISO launched because they said they were going to have every Saturday Night Live, and I was excited to go back and watch some of those early 80s years that don't get rerun very much, and it turned out most of them were in like it'd be like 32-minute episodes, so they would just be cutting what they couldn't clear and getting rid of all the music. I mean, you still see a lot of great stuff in those, but however, though, what we're talking about here is those first 5 years. More or less, there was some changes within that, but kind of like the combination of young or on-the-rise comedians who weren't all that well-known at the time to most of the country, although within comedy they had done a lot of stuff. And you get Lorne Michaels producing it, but you get kind of like these competent people behind the camera and technical people too, because I think one thing that's easy to forget is they weren't just going out and winging it like we talked about. They were preparing it, and they had like competent people directing and producing and making the trains run on time. So that kind of combined and created Saturday Night Live, and it really did become a big phenomenon, and magazine covers and cast members becoming famous and leaving. But we picked one episode that we thought was fairly representative, but not necessarily, maybe not one of the most all-time famous ones, but just kind of like a good, solid representative episode.
So what? It's season 3, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that first run was 5 seasons. This is like the beginning of season 3, so we're almost like smack dab in the middle of that run. And this is the 5th episode. November 12th, 1977 was when it premiered, and the host and musical guest was the great Ray Charles.
Yeah. Who, because I got to look these things up sometimes, was only 47 at the time.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, no, 57.
That's interesting.
57.
So 57, he would have been born in 1920.
I think that's right, yeah. Okay, that's a little older, because I always, first of all, Ray Charles in the 70s and early 80s was all over TV.
Yes.
So, and I always thought of him as old.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, part of it, the glasses.
No, 47. He was born in 1930.
Okay, that makes sense. So, like in the 60s, he'd be in his 30s.
Yeah. So
he's
but
a
he
little
really
younger than
was.
you might have expected?
Yes.
Yeah.
just because I perceived him as old.
Yeah.
And I mean, his voice just naturally sounds kind of old, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was on the Muppet Show. He was a, a figure on TV and commercials and
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And he was a fixture in playground jokes. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not condoning it or supporting
No.
it, everybody, but I mean, it was Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Stevie Wonder for a while, but Ray Charles a lot. I mean, you'd always have jokes, you know,
Yeah.
what are you, Ray Charles or something?
Right. And this whole episode had fun with his blindness.
Yes,
too.
it sure does, yeah.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I think it works out well for the comedy, too, is that Ray Charles is almost always like the smarter than everybody that thinks
Yes.
they're getting one over on him, which
Yeah.
makes it funny, I think.
Yeah.
Which
And that he has a sense of humor about
Yeah,
it.
well, and I think it's good. I think this combination of Ray Charles with this cast and the fact that he comes out on top, it kind of shows a couple of things. One, that the show was seen as like sick humor and ruthless and had that reputation, but it wasn't always like that. And
Yeah.
at its base, it was not always as off the wall as you might think. And two, a lot of things they did on the early years, they combined that young cast with like an older showbiz veteran. And you had like sort of that like putting on a variety show. And I think in this one, I mean, we can kind of talk about this, Mike, but I got the impression, like even at the end, like it seemed like there was a big affection for like the cast. And you got the impression that they generally did have a good time. And I think that the cast loved having Ray Charles there that week.
Yeah, I
like he
think-
must have been one of the good ones that they had.
There was a sense of like fondness around him, and there was that one I don't know what to call it, where they were like all like standing around the piano.
Yeah.
Oh well, it was a bit, but the bit at the end
Yeah.
where they, you know, Michael O'Donoghue gives him a painting that's not really a painting.
Right. Which,
But you could see, I think, you know, in certain faces like Bill Murray's and maybe Belushi's too, and just like this admiration.
Yeah.
Like he's one of their heroes.
and actually just this, we were talking before about like what to cover, and I went and watched like a more infamous episode, the Milton Berle episode, which was like apparently a total culture clash from everything that was written. Like
Yeah.
he insisted on doing things his way, but from what I've read, I think guys like John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, they were a little bit more reverent to him, and they were trying to forgive him because they'd grown up watching him, and they sort of had that respect for him.
Right, yeah.
Same thing when somebody like Broderick Crawford was like a big drinker, and he would be on there, and it seems like a total mismatch.
Yeah.
But I think guys like Aykroyd and Belushi that grew up watching these guys, they were their heroes. They actually had respect for them. So it wasn't quite the idea the reputation would be, they're just tearing down everything else on TV. But no, in many ways, they were putting together like an old-fashioned TV show that just happened to have like drug references and other stuff in it. So.
Yeah. Well, and in the case of this episode in particular, because of your host is also the musical guest, this one felt like more like a variety show than like an episode now.
Yeah.
You think of it as a different form, as the SNL form, you
Yeah.
know, a sketch comedy show that
Right.
has musical guests.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like a variety show.
I think that's a very good point, yeah.
And sometimes like it starts like a musical thing will become a comedy thing, or a comedy thing will become a musical thing, or they're mixed together in different ways.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you always have to respect the people that do double duty. So Ray Charles is all over this show. And, you know, not to be funny, he doesn't have the luxury of reading cue cards.
No, he doesn't.
So, you know, I respect that too.
Yeah.
And really, you watch this show, and he's, I think, one of the better guests, all-around guests that I've seen.
Yeah. Now this is certainly the period where he had become sort of an entertainer more than a
Right.
you know, like
star.
I wasn't for a long time aware of that. You know, his early years, like when he was this sort of groundbreaking musician.
Yeah.
You know, this was the Ray Charles I knew.
Yeah, like as a...
And he would do, you know, he did country albums, and he mentions like he usually travels with a big band. And
Yeah.
He, you know, does, well, like Georgia on My Mind and God Bless America, or was it America the Beautiful?
America the Beautiful,
America
yeah.
the Beautiful. You know, those are the things you think of him in his later life.
Yeah, I think of him. I thought of him too more like as an ambassador, just all overall entertainer and like goodwill ambassador kind of guy, and doing like commercials and PSAs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's easy to forget that he was such an accomplished musician, and you know, some of the stuff he did. Yeah, and this was kind of probably the time that he was starting to peak, just as his overall fame.
Yeah. So do we want to go through some of the...
Yeah, I think we can. It was an interesting format at the beginning. It opens up with him singing and performing, but they sort of mix in
Right, after
some like performances. Yeah, he does a
they do the tease,
Yes.
which was like a Godfather thing.
The whole cold open of the show was the Godfather bit. Okay, with Bill Murray and
who I didn't I didn't recognize Bill Murray.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
Just because he had a wig on.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that must be one of the writers.
Yeah.
Later it dawned on me, oh, it's Bill Murray.
Yeah. Bill Murray doing like Tom Hagen and
Yeah.
and John Belushi doing, excellent Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
Which kind of just gets to why he was so good is like take away. He just seems to get the essence of the character and like in a funny way. I mean, it's brilliant, but it's a play on NBC's trouble but they're specifically talking about airing The Godfather as a movie of the week, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that maybe they really
might
did.
have just happened. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're talking about how they can't do it.
And he's offended by it. Yeah. And then it goes to the usual.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting like little thing because they sort of they had Ray performing music, and they kind of mix in a few like little other segments.
Yeah, like went from monologue to a song, and then he started playing Georgia on My Mind, and they cut that to Jimmy.
Dan Aykroyd. Yeah. Dan Aykroyd doing Jimmy Carter, and
right.
Which is one of his famous again, kind of getting into the recurring characters and impersonations and political humor. But I think it was an interesting kind of slant. Like Dan Aykroyd is it's kind of Jimmy Carter telling everybody, "Hey, don't blame me." And it was
very prescient.
This is like in 1981 when you got somebody else here.
Yeah.
And you don't have any energy, I guess.
Right. It was a recurring theme for our show, the energy crisis.
Yeah.
But that nobody's doing anything he said.
Right.
And he's warned people many, many, many times.
Yeah.
This is happening, and we need to invest in these things. And someone else is probably going to be president, and that part certainly was true.
Yeah, and it's funny to me because like Dan Aykroyd's Jimmy Carter is like not a technically precise impersonation.
No.
But there's just something about the way he did that character that people just loved, and And he didn't play Jimmy Carter as a buffoon. Like he played like Richard Nixon as like a really like mockable character. But like his Jimmy Carter was always like the hippest, like the hip president. And I guess maybe you could say like, political bias or something going in there. But Jimmy Carter was like he sort of was for a while. He was considered like almost a countercultural or like a young people's president. And
right.
It sort of reflected the philosophy of the show that they would sort of take his side.
And it's also when like he has like Dan Aykroyd has a barely visible mustache.
Yeah. Which
makes all these impressions weird.
Yeah.
Because he does another one later that I know we'll talk about, and it's the same thing. What? I don't even know, is it a mustache or is it like a David Brinkley thing where his upper lip looks like a mustache? But
so I always enjoy his Jimmy Carter. Just like it's like a unique character in and of itself, in a way that maybe some of the other presidents that they've done over the years, I think they were more doing like impersonations or attempting.
Right, and then of course the first season of this was Chevy Chase's non-impression of Gerald Ford.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think that's to the show's credit.
Yeah.
They made characters of the presidents instead of just trying to do straight impersonations. I think that made it better. So we also get Garrett Morris as Ella Fitzgerald.
Right.
And they do bits where he's breaking glass with his singing.
Yeah, there was the Memorex commercial from back then where Memorex is so clear that I think on the commercial the tape you couldn't tell them apart.
Is it real or is it Memorex?
Yeah, and the tape would break the glass just like she could. And
and it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And they do like a thing where they cut away and then they cut back to Ray Charles, and you see Ray Charles his sunglasses broke, which is very funny.
Yeah.
But it's one of the more, if you want to talk about a 2018 perspective on it, one of the what some people would say the more unfortunate legacies of the show is how Garrett Morris was the one that ended up in drag like every single episode. It seems like. This is another example. They really didn't have a whole lot for Garrett to do.
Right.
But
they didn't have a black woman on the cast.
Yeah. But it just seems like
its own problem.
Yeah. Well, to me, I never considered it a problem, but I did think even when I was young, I just did think it was noticeable that Garrett Morris was the one they always put it in drag.
Right.
I guess maybe it's better than putting like Lorraine Newman in blackface.
Yeah.
But it's just weird because it stands out because they weren't giving him anything else to do, and he was kind of an unreliable performer. He wasn't always in 100% condition to perform, I guess you might say.
Right. Yeah.
But everybody was doing stuff on that show, and it just seems weird now, especially like in an episode with Ray Charles. Yeah. I just one thing, and this is something people wouldn't even thought about back then, but I'm thinking now it's like poor Garrett Morris probably thought, okay, here's an opportunity. Maybe I can do like, maybe I can be like Ray Charles, like manager. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like something because you got another African American on the show.
Right.
But even then, he's comes out at the beginning. And he's Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah, but it was a funny sketch.
It was, yeah, it was fun.
And it was, and the sort of monologue was the first time we got Ray putting one over on SNL. Like he said, in his contract, he'd wanted to do it at Carnegie Hall.
No.
But then he's like, they think I'm at Carnegie, or that I think, they think that I think we're at Carnegie Hall, but I know we're not. But what they don't know is the real Ray Charles is at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, that is good.
And then this time you get to the end and he says something about and you're gonna have to pay for my sunglasses.
Yeah.
So he's always, he knows what's going on.
Yeah, he's sharp.
Yeah.
He has that amiable, and we know that in real life the real Ray Charles is no saint.
Yeah.
But he comes off as a pretty cool guy in this this show.
Yeah.
So I believe next I have the Duty Girls.
Yeah.
Sort of like playing on Howdy Doody.
Yeah.
And again, kind of references to old television was something that they did. Saturday Night Live was like a meta show before everything was meta.
Yeah.
Now everything is, but they were, and I guess again, like a lot of variety shows of the 50s and 60s, they would be commenting on other things that were on television, and Saturday Night Live continued that tradition. Sometimes putting like a little different spin on it, but yeah. We had the Duty Girls with was it Gilda Radner
and Lorraine Newman. Yeah. And then Bill Murray comes in at the end.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was funny, but I liked how strange it was.
Yeah.
Like because they're acting like marionettes.
Yes.
And you see at the end, they pan up and above the set and there are crew people like kind of operating the strings.
Yeah,
or at least holding the ropes up. But, there are things like where Gilda Radner tries to sit down on a couch and can't at first because she's a marionette.
Yeah.
So, the physical comedy is really impressive.
Yeah. I think that's a good example of how maybe the concept wasn't necessarily all that great, but they do little things like the performances and the execution of it, and little things like the camera shots and showing that at the end. I think that helps it.
Right, and the premise is that she's Howdy Doody's widow, that he died, and Lorraine Newman's his sister, and she's trying to move on. This widow is trying to move on, but having trouble, and then every time someone says, "What time is it?" she breaks out crying.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. And Bill Murray shows up as a date, and he says something about that, and,
right?
And the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah,
but I did like the physical part of it.
Yeah. Now next I've got the Tom Snyder sketch.
Yeah,
which was really one of the highlights for me.
Yes,
and I think even I probably started watching this before I knew who Tom Snyder is, but the more I watch Tom Snyder, the more I love this persona.
Yeah, seeing that now, like, whatever a year after we talked about Tom Snyder, that's like a really, maybe not perfect impression, but I mean the rhythms of it, and the oddities, and there's Ray Charles even says something about, and I just know your hair is 14 different colors or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's just.
And he does a whole thing at the beginning about getting a pretzel. Yeah,
like a pointless story that he doesn't really finish.
He's like, not one of those. Not most people out there think the little pretzels that come in the bag, but no, there's one of those big New York fat pretzels.
Yeah.
And so is mad I didn't get him one.
Yeah.
Next time.
Like little references, inside references, and it just so perfectly Tom Snyder. And really, that's kind of the essence of it. I mean. He has an exchange, like an interview with Ray Charles, where he's asking like these kind of funny questions. But really, like to me, like the funny part of it is it's just the kind of stuff that you could easily see Tom Snyder asking.
Yeah, like the questions didn't seem accurate to Tom Snyder because they were like lame questions. Really. Right.
It's not that Tom Snyder's an idiot, but it's just something like the style and like sort of the way he's like playing like that sort of like. Clueless in a sense, like interviewer, like show busy interviewer.
Yeah.
But I very much enjoyed that whole segment.
Yeah. And that's a perfect idea if you're going to have someone like Ray Charles as your host.
Yeah.
That you find a way to use them, without having to make them act so much.
Right. It's kind of like, it's kind of like they've got that same kind of gimmick now. You'll have catch-alls and maybe they'll do like talk show.
Yeah.
Like something like the Prince show or something like they had for a while, right?
Right.
Where we'll just do the Prince show and then have the celebrity come on and do that, and it's kind of a ready-made format.
Right. And especially when they use athletes.
Exactly. So they also did. I enjoyed the Young Caucasians.
That wasn't great.
Wait, I really enjoyed this, and
So Garrett Morris did get to play Ray Charles' manager there.
that's true. That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, it's something that like that gimmick. I mean, the idea is that you have these white kids, these
Right.
clean cut white people coming out and singing "What I Say."
Yeah, they're going to do, for a movie, they're going to do, as happened back then, the popular version of his song.
Yeah.
And then he can do his thing on the R&B record that'll
Right.
be sold in the South. And but it's like the entire cast except for Garrett Morris. You know, they're in the Letterman sweaters and we all got their hair combed nice. They're harmonizing.
Yeah.
They're all gee willikers,
They're
Mr.
sincere,
Charles.
Yeah. And just everything about it is so square.
Yes, and then
The arrangement, the
calling
singing.
it "What Did I Say?"
Yeah. Yeah. The enunciation,
Yeah.
the singing, yes, everything about it, and I think that's like something we've seen many times since, but I don't know how often that was done then. But this particular, I thought, was right on the money.
It was right on the money, and it's one of those things you forget about that show is that a lot of times the people are multi-talented.
Yeah, yeah,
They're not just funny, but I mean they were all singing well and and doing choreography and stuff.
Right.
Very versatile.
right. They were able to capture the essence of the comedy, but also they could carry off the performance aspect of that.
Yeah.
It was very good,
And then at the end, Ray Charles got to do it his way,
yeah,
which was cool too. Of
yeah,
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One of his most known songs. So
Yeah.
that was very cool. Then I think they went into Weekend Update.
Yeah, which was
Jane Curtin
Right.
and Bill Murray at this time.
Aykroyd.
Oh, this was Curtin.
Or Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The other episode I watched was
Yeah.
Bill Murray had replaced Dan Aykroyd.
Like this struck me as not typical what you think of with Weekend Update. Like it really wasn't that topical. It was just kind of a lot of absurd stuff, and a lot of the pictures were sight gags and
Yeah, yeah.
things.
There's a little bit more variety. Well, I guess there still is today, but yeah, I think it was a little bit less topical.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was atypical of the show back
It was
then.
more just like a parody of news.
Yeah,
rather than
exactly.
a
Yep.
parody of the news.
Yeah, and I think that's I kind of like that a little bit better. Now I think it's seen. Again, I don't want to talk too much. I think now there's a pressure on it to be like to do political comedy. It was back then. It was just kind of like more idea lampooning the idea of the newscast and some of those conventions.
Right.
Even the recurring characters that they had on were sort of like types that you would see, like that whole thing about having people come on as an editorial. I mean, I think
Yeah.
nowadays people come on just because they expect them to and now here with. Not realizing, like, well, back in the day, they would really have on local news, you'd have some old lady or somebody come on and do, like, the community voice, and
Right,
that was
yeah.
actually something that would happen on real news.
Yeah. I mean, I think now, unfortunately for them, maybe, is that since everybody has access to everything that's going on, that by the time you get around to, like, if it were just like a weird local thing
Yeah.
that they happen to stumble on, well, everybody's seen it because someone shared it on Facebook and everybody's made the same dumb jokes about it.
Exactly.
You know, like there's one of the gags is like there's a picture of Jimmy Carter and his mom's hugging him and her hand is
Yes.
very close to a specific part of him, and now that would be all over the internet and
Right.
Twitter and everything.
Yeah, not just the image would already be there, and everybody would have already made their own joke.
Yeah, but I like my favorite parts in this were like Dan Aykroyd. There's a story about
The
rabies.
rabid,
and
yeah.
He's foaming at the mouth.
Yeah, she's talking about the threat and the growing rabies,
Yeah.
and they just go to a 2-shot and show him, like,
Right.
foaming and, like, sputtering a little bit. Yeah, it
Which
was-
definitely seems like a Dan Aykroyd kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that sort of aggressive part of him.
yeah, yeah,
I'll foam at the mouth, sure.
yeah.
And Bill Murray he comes on and that was interesting because in a way it was contemporary to now. He was complaining about
Yeah.
a film review of Close Encounters that spoiled
Yeah.
Close Encounters and doing it in sort of his jazzy
Yeah,
Bill
like,
Murray
hey,
way.
come on,
Yeah.
what's the deal here?
And then he ends up spoiling the whole movie.
Yeah, yeah,
Like realizing
yeah.
his mistake.
It was good. I think Jane Curtin, arguably, I mean, what she had, Coneheads, but this might be her most famous role on Saturday Night Live was doing the Weekend Update.
Yeah.
And she was really good at it.
Yeah.
I think she's probably underrated because she wasn't doing a lot of crazy stuff. And in this
Right.
episode, like in the singing and stuff, I mean, she was good.
Yeah.
I don't think she necessarily gets her due. I think a lot of the attention from the female side goes to Gilda Radner, and deservedly so. But I always liked what Jane Curtin did, and
Yeah.
I liked her sort of like totally straight laced Weekend Update persona was always really good. And Aykroyd too was good in that. But so then next, Ray Charles gives us some more music, a real like medley, I guess, of his songs.
Yeah, and he brings out his old horn guys, and that was cool. So they do a bunch of songs with lyrics, and then they do like a really jazz instrumental,
Like kind of a like little jam.
And they all had solos, and then he played a sax solo, and
yeah,
it was a good piece.
it was. After that that musical interlude, we get a little stand up.
Yeah.
From Franklin Ajayi. And this was odd. The whole thing about this was odd.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's another thing it's kind of was a tradition on Saturday Night Live over the years, is having like just a comedian come on and do a spot for a few minutes. But I used to always kind of wonder, like, well, do you really need this? I mean, and I guess from the show's point of view, like, why not? You get another comedian on, and that's 5 minutes we don't have to write.
Yeah, I think so.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, there's not enough stuff to go around for everybody else, and you have to bring in somebody else to do this. Like, what's the deal with this? It just always seemed kind of weird. But and this one, again, kind of going to the theme about commentary on television, he's doing a bit largely about, like, Star Trek.
Yeah,
like his routine is about watching Star Trek reruns.
Yeah.
And I don't know. What'd you think about this segment?
It was okay. I don't remember ever hearing of him before. We have another 40 years of Star Trek jokes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's tough for him. And I'm sure he's not the only person who's done jokes about the, Spock mating episode.
Right. But it's cool, though. I mean, he wasn't... It was kind of cool, though, to have, like, a black comic, not just doing stuff about, like, Sanford and Son or something.
Yeah.
He's doing... you can mention Uhura or whatever, but he's not doing... like jokes that you would expect a quote unquote black comic to do. He's just doing jokes about TV that
like every once in a while he threw in related it to that somehow.
Right.
But it wasn't the overarching thing.
I think it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
That he came in and did it, and and at the time it's funny because like one of the most famous SNL skits was like with Belushi as Captain Kirk, and they did a Star Trek. So it's just funny that in the mid '70s, before the motion picture. Well, I guess when did the motion picture come out in like '78 maybe?
78 because he says something about they're going to do a new series next year, which obviously didn't happen.
Yeah. So
and we should have gotten the crack research team on that. I'm curious if there was talk of that at some point.
Yes, well, we'll definitely clarify that.
Maybe he meant the movie. The movie might even been 79.
I mean, I think it might have been 79. I mean, there was probably talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that the show, everybody knew the show, even back then. And it was a big enough thing that Saturday Night Live would comment on it so regularly.
79 for the movie.
So it definitely would have been in production, maybe in 78 they would have known it, but maybe we'll have to look into that. Yeah, maybe they had talked seriously about it and then decided, no, let's just make a movie out of it. 3 seasons in a movie.
Right.
Star Trek. And I guess there was the animated series in the early 70s that kind of kept the franchise out there. So, but people were responding to it. Now, it had kind of a weird end to this, his...
Right, he was done and they didn't cut away from him, right?
Yeah, or he just like, oh, what, we're done now? Or
something like that.
It was almost like he thought that... And
I think he thought he was done, and
okay.
They didn't, and
he was waiting for some cue they didn't get or something,
yeah.
Like, I can never tell in these things, like, because they do dress rehearsals and stuff, and
right.
You think that he only had one thing to do is show up and do his... I don't know what happened there.
I think maybe he did it like 10 seconds too long.
Yeah.
Or like he went to 10 seconds short.
I think that's probably what it is, yeah. I mean, again, that's just kind of the thing about live TV, and that's something that, like in the rerun of this, I don't think that was probably in the half-hour version, but you see like the full thing, and you see the whole thing, and you see like little weird things like that I like.
Yeah.
Just like the bumpers and things like that. It's cool seeing the whole thing in its context. Then we get the slow reading course.
Yes.
The slow reading course. The Evelyn Woodsky.
Yes.
It's done as a old time, like a commercial.
Yeah. It's a reversal of speed reading.
Yes.
Everyone in it is a speed reader and now has learned to read slowly.
Yeah.
And can take in more information. And I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous, but you get like Bill Murray's a surgeon, and he's he either says I was told or worried that I was making mistakes.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting a lot more information and know what I can do.
Right. Reading his medical books.
And Jane Curtin like laughs at something and like before I couldn't actually laugh at any of the humor I was reading so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a simple idea and something that they've always been known for, but lampooning commercials of that style. You don't get that now. I mean, if you do, it's almost like there's an infomercial where there's sort of like it's making fun of itself.
Yeah.
But just have the old timey announcer coming in like, now, and like,
Right.
you can learn how to read quickly. Are you frustrated by it? Are you blah blah blah? Are you this? And this is just emulating that so well. And the fact that they get, and I think that was something that was important to them. The fact that they get the form right helps the comedy, because it looks so much like a regular commercial. It's just that with this totally reversed premise.
And it ends with Ray Charles doing speed or slow braille reading.
Yeah.
And saying that he used to get blisters on his fingers.
Yeah.
When he read.
And I like it's something like, as soon as that you see the premise, and you're probably figuring that, hoping maybe that they'll end with Ray Charles or something, and they do, and it works.
Right, and it's good too because it's a sketch and not a filmed piece, or I mean parts of it, the graphics are filmed, but
right.
So every time they have the testimonial, they're sitting in the same chair.
Yeah,
which is a nice
touch
that a cheap commercial would probably have too.
Right. So that was good. I mean, it just so you don't have to reinvent the wheel everything, but if, again, with good performances and good execution, you come up with a nice little sketch that was very funny. The next sketch I had was a weird one where he gets robbed, basically. This was just kind of a. I thought this was kind of odd.
It was kind of because it started out with him narrating it.
Yeah.
And talking about how Con Ed and being thankful because they saved his life.
Yeah.
Like, where is this going?
Yeah.
And then it starts with him on like having just some random phone conversation.
Yeah.
And he gets a knock at the door.
Yeah, actually, people come. They don't break in. They just come to the door.
They say room service.
Yeah.
And it's Garrett Morris and Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
And they're coming to rob him. But Garrett Morris recognizes him. And he doesn't. He's I can't rob Ray Charles. And Dan Aykroyd doesn't care. He's like, "This be easy because he's blind."
Right.
And then there's a blackout.
Yeah.
And then you hear a bunch of commotion and comes back. The lights come up and Ray Charles is just sitting on the couch. He's calling room service to actually get some room service. Garrett Morris is laid out on the floor or something, and Dan Aykroyd's character is dead.
Yeah.
He's got a sheet over him and blood.
Yeah.
And he's also, can you send the police?
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing, like, again, to kind of like put it in context, I guess it's making fun of Con Ed and blackouts, which were a big thing back then, as much as it is Ray Charles.
Right.
So the idea, that it saved him, so it was a good thing that they had this blackout instead of, being a terrible thing that, the city of New York in particular can't keep its lights on.
But also, again, like puts him in a good light. Like,
Yeah.
Look what he can do.
Exactly.
That you don't expect.
Right. So, again, another... It's a little offbeat, but I enjoyed that. Not a whole lot to it, but good for what it was.
Yeah. So Ray Charles, clearly, he never plays anybody but Ray Charles in this.
That's true, yeah.
Which is maybe unique. I mean, even when Michael Jordan was on, they had him play a couple characters, I think. But it works.
It sure does. And then I guess we get Ray singing again as we come to the close of the show.
Yeah.
The cast comes out. He's on stage at the piano.
Well, yeah, he does a full song.
Yeah,
I think, or does he do it? No, because he does a full song with the band.
Okay.
And then there's the last thing where he's at the piano and the cast is there, just wanting to thank him and talking to him. I don't know. It's like Kermit interviewing somebody on the Muppet Show.
Yeah, they're just wrapping everything up and have kind of the feel good ending.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Mike comes out.
Right.
And Mr. Mike was supposed to be Michael O'Donoghue. The writer was the character that was supposed to like the edgier, and I guess in real life he was the one that was kind of fighting to interject more extreme humor and that kind of thing.
So Mr. Mike was a recurring
character. Yeah.
Was he sort of like an on-screen Lorne Michaels?
Yeah, sometimes I think he'd come on as like a representative of the show. Yeah. Like as a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, or as like Mr. Mike would be like this kind of guy with power over the show.
Yeah.
Something like that. And that's kind of what he is here.
Right.
But he's sort of distinct from the rest of them. And every now and then he'd be like in a sketch as somebody else too. But again, it's kind of interesting, like what we're really combining themes we've been talking about, sort of taking something that seems like kind of a cruel or sick premise and sort of subverting it a little bit and making it a little bit, nicer, for lack of a better word, and giving Ray Charles the upper hand.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Mike comes out and is like talking him up and everything, and talking about what it's like. They had it was a commissioned
something,
a big painting.
some kind of matching fund, and they're going to give this. Yeah, they bought this painting. They're going to give to some blind charity.
Yeah, like I forget some priceless oil painting or something.
Right, and it's actually
they're going to so they do the big reveal, like it's behind a curtain, and it's a huge painting, a huge frame anyway, and it reveals it.
And it just says, "Don't tell him, please."
Yeah. In big letters.
Yeah.
So then Mr. Mike, gives his spiel, and then he leaves, and then Ray Charles. I guess he's kind of making his general comments, but he says, I don't want to butcher the way he does it, because he says everything, and well, he does a couple things actually, and he makes sort of a racially charged comment because he said like, "Hey everybody, now what Mr. Mike doesn't know is like when he gets back, he's going to have like 10 of the biggest black dudes he's ever,
That's
going
right.
to show him,
at the after party.
Yeah, what you're going to show him what for or something like that, and everybody laughs or something.
Right. Then he repeats what's on the sign. Don't tell him, please.
Yeah, please don't tell him.
Yeah.
And everybody laughs. But they do what seemed to me like pretty heartfelt. He kind of and heartfelt comments about what a good time he had, and it was good work with them, and it seems like mutual. And then they do a little. He sings again, I guess, over the credits.
Yeah, and like a jam.
Yeah, he says like, "Why don't you like, you guys say your goodnight, and then we're going to do a little music here at the end." And
yeah, he's sort of ad-libbing lyrics.
Yeah. It's just cool. It seemed like, this is a really good episode.
And one thing we didn't mention is the brief appearance of next week's host, Buck Henry.
Yeah, that's right. He actually came out, and this is something you would never see in like the old reruns. And it's kind of cool to see that. Yeah, that they actually have Buck Henry himself hyping the next episode.
Yeah.
We talked about whether to include Buck Henry, and we got him on here after all.
Yeah.
Inadvertently.
Well, no. Odds are pretty good in that era.
He'd show up a lot. So,
yeah.
I mean, this is a good episode. I guess, like some of the other ones, we could, Steve Martin was on a lot. Buck Henry was on a lot. Frequent guests.
Yeah.
I guess, but I think pretty much covered everything that was on this episode. Did you have any other favorite like memorable moments, or like your favorite cast member? I mean, for me, it was like Belushi is somebody that he had like a legend about him. I think because he died young. That again, you might think, well, some of his stuff maybe it's a little overinflated, but I think he's somebody that comes up, and even in this, where he didn't dominate the show, but like in his moments, he's always has like a power on screen that you can always see.
Yeah.
So for me, he was probably my favorite. Although Bill Murray, as a kid, because of like Ghostbusters and stuff, I remember Bill Murray being the man. But
I like Belushi. I still don't. I just haven't seen enough, and I should. This is what I should watch. I mean, I've seen parts of the Blues Brothers. I've never gotten the appeal of that. I have very mixed feelings about Animal House. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's funny in it, but I just the whole kind of thing rubs me the wrong way a little bit. Like in that Ghostbusters period, I remember liking Bill Murray, but also liking Dan Aykroyd. So at least when I started seeing some of these reruns, or maybe they did an anniversary special around that, and now like I kind of like latter day Bill Murray a little more than like Ghostbusters doesn't quite hold up for me anymore. Kind of for some of the same reasons as Animal House, where it's like he's a little bit too smarmy and a little, you're putting it over on people who aren't even good adversaries, I guess. I don't know. To me, like the attitude of Animal House, or at least his character in Ghostbusters, is sort of better than you attitude, plays differerly than, say, the Marx Brothers doing the same kind of thing. Groucho's not smug. Or Bugs Bunny. Well, Bugs Bunny's a little smug, but I don't know. That's a thing. But I like him. I mean, I do like him. But everybody was good. I mean, this episode, again, because it was a little unique, felt more ensemble than anyone being a big star. I mean, Belushi is interesting, though, just to hear about and hear that he could be a total train wreck, and then as soon as a sketch started, he knew all his lines and he knew everything, and he was such whatever his talent was, could overcome, at least for a performance, his demons.
Which is ironic, considering obviously he's the one that died. Yeah. But apparently he was the one that was best able to keep it together.
Right, like you mentioned, Garrett Morrison.
And maybe that gave him more of a sense of being indestructible. I don't know what happened there, but that is kind of a weird juxtaposition. Yeah. Because he was the one that ultimately suffered the most, obviously, for the drug overdoses or drug use.
Everybody's good though. A bold statement.
Yeah.
Everybody in the original cast.
Yeah.
Plus Bill Murray of SNL is good.
Yeah, I think Chevy Chase was the first year, And the show, I think a lot of people will point to like one of the early Steve Martin appearances is when it really turned a corner. And I like there's a Richard Pryor episode early in the first season that I think is one of the best ever. And but to me, I think one of the reasons I didn't necessarily want to talk about that was more Richard Pryor imposing himself on Saturday Night Live, whereas this, as we've mentioned, it was more the ensemble and just all sorts of different elements of the show without kind of a lot of the other things getting in the way. Like there weren't any notable disasters or behind the scenes incidents that I know of associated with this particular episode, and I think maybe that makes it a better one to talk about when we're discussing just the show as a show and not the big phenomenon and legend.
Right. I'll tell you one of my favorite bits, and this came from seeing those reruns on MTV or whatever. It's Bill Murray and Steve Martin just walking out on an empty stage and like looking out in the audience.
Oh,
and doing their faces, and then I guess Steve Martin is essentially doing the jerk character or that one of his what is that thing there? And Bill Murray's doing his Caddyshack. I don't know what that is. What the hell is that thing there? Yeah, and just back and forth, and it's so ridiculous. Yeah. And I remember telling a friend about it, and he's like, "I don't understand." And then he saw it, and then loved it. But it is hard to relate. But I love that.
I don't know when that came from, but I mean, the show changed like in the 5th season when Aykroyd and Belushi were gone, and boy, Bill Murray, he sure got a lot of sketches then.
Yeah.
And they kind of upgraded like Harry Shearer and Franklin and Davis, and
right.
It was a different show then, but seasons 2 through 4, I'd say maybe get Bill Murray in the cast at its peak.
Like within the last year or so, I watched an episode from that era, the one where they're like protesting Buck Henry. He's a host, and people are on the street and upset about him hosting. It just seemed, I don't know, strange.
Yeah.
Just like all that Franklin and Davis, but there was funny stuff for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's so much like lore with it too. I mean, there's the oral history you referred to, by James Miller and Tom Shales, I think, Live from New York.
Yeah.
And there was a book that one of my favorite entertainment-related books of all time is I think it's just called Saturday Night by I think Weingrad and Hill, maybe, I can't remember. They're co-authors, but it was written in the early 80s, I think. And it was one of like the first, it was a really like insider's look at like talking about all the kind of backstage stuff. And at its time, there weren't a lot of books that came out like that, I think. And that was a very influential book. And I highly recommend that to anybody who's interested in reading about this era of the show.
Yeah. And I mean, despite all the stuff I said about it being too kind of overpraised or whatever now, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I did read that oral history, and it was very engaging.
Yeah.
And the creative process of it is unique and interesting, and not something I would ever want to be involved in. But whether you want it or not, it has been an influence.
Yeah.
So many of those people did go on to do bigger things, or certainly a number of them did. And like I said, a lot of people I like better outside of the context of the show.
Yeah, and you've got Lorne Michaels, who's still around, and
he's more powerful.
He practically owns NBC late night. I mean, that's all Lorne Michaels now, right? I mean, he's doing Fallon and Seth Meyers, and he's the kingmaker there.
I don't think he's involved in
Carson Daly.
Yeah, Carson Daly.
No, it's just like I'm not going to do a Lorne Michaels impersonation, but
we're not.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary.
It's not that far off from your Paul Williams.
Carson Daly, like not going to a meeting to Lorne Michaels and just basically asking, "Hey, you want to take over my show?"
No, we're not going to do that. But from what you hear, he might not give a direct answer.
Yeah.
Like every story you hear about somebody getting the show, they don't know that they got the show.
Right. That's become almost as much of a... Like, stories about Lorne Michaels has become almost a thing as much as the show itself, which is one of the reasons it's become, like, sort of insufferable over the years.
Right. Like, when Mark Maron finally got to interview him, a bulk of the reason he wanted to interview him wasn't because he was Lorne Michaels, was because that he had gone and talked to him about becoming the Weekend Update host. I think this was in the right after Norm Macdonald period, and he never knew what happened.
Yeah.
And he wanted to get that straight.
Yeah,
find out that did he just blow it, or was there some other thing, or did someone badmouth?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it just seems like there's so many things. Like Lorne Michaels has become like a caricature
Yeah.
Although he doesn't do like a lot of. I mean, you don't see him making the circuit a lot talking
No.
about. He's more in the background now. But
Yeah.
I mean, there just seems like so many more interesting things to ask Lorne Michaels about than, But hey, I'm not blaming Mark Maron. I'm just saying in general, like to me, it's more interesting like how they developed the show and just the backstory and how you survive and become more powerful after 40 years. You got to give him credit for that. And launching movie franchises, other TV shows. Not everything's been a success, but hey, quite a career. And you got to give him credit for everything because he's been the guy on top for all but like 5 years.
Keeping Paul Simon in the public eye.
Yeah. Well.
What do you think? I mean, in general, it seems like the movies that came from this have never been.
It seemed like that was a big reputation for a while, wasn't it? And now, are they even? When was the last time they did one from a Saturday Night Live sketch?
I can't think of one.
Maybe
they did a MacGruber.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And I think that kind of tanked.
Yeah. I mean, is he involved with like the Amy Poehler, Tina Fey kind of movies? He probably gets some kind of deal with that.
He's some of their like 30 Rock. His company was involved in that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's involved in any of her other ones. Probably some of the movies.
I mean, off the top of my head, the best movie based on a Saturday Night Live. I'm not a huge fan of the Blues Brothers either.
No.
I think a lot of people might say that, but I would probably say, can you guess what I would?
Well, I can only think of a few.
Wayne's World.
The first Wayne's World, yeah.
Yeah, the first Wayne's World probably was very successful.
But then I think that killed the sketch.
Yeah,
because the sketch just became plug-in,
right,
things. I'm not 100% sure I've seen the second one, so I shouldn't judge that. But
I mean, you got a list of.
I mean, I've never seen the Coneheads movie, which was years later.
Yeah.
But I believe that's not well regarded.
No, it's Pat.
It's Pat. Yeah.
The Mary Gallagher superstar.
Right.
That movie.
And
Stuart Smalley.
The one. God. Yeah. And the Will Ferrell, Chris Kattan. Those two dudes.
Oh, right. The Roxbury, not the Roxbury.
I hate that sketch so much that I can't imagine liking the movie.
Yeah. It definitely seemed like they went through a period where it looked like they were just trying to crank out sketches or something. Or movie ideas from the sketches.
Yeah. But then there are other movies he's involved in that weren't directly related, like Three Amigos or...
Okay, yeah.
Actually, I think that might have been in the period he left. I'm not sure.
Okay, but. Yeah, I mean, maybe we're missing a big one, but...
Yeah.
Not a great track record from the movies based on these characters.
No.
But I mean, over the years, the characters do find a way to stick around, and they
do.
They linger.
I mean, I guess usually the people who write them maintain some ownership over, because a lot of times they're bringing them from Second City or something. They already developed the character.
Yeah, that's true. And like in the first 5 years, you had like the Coneheads, which you mentioned. The Loopners, Todd, Lisa Loopner.
Yeah.
The Tom Snyder, some of the political impersonations and
Samurai.
Yeah, the Samurai.
Cheeseburger.
Yeah. So they definitely had their share of recurring and memorable. And you had like Mr. Bill. I mean, we didn't have the pre-tape, the videotape segments or the short films, which are kind of a big part of the show in the early years. Albert Brooks, filmmakers doing those. Tom Schiller. So
Muppets in the first season.
Yeah. So it took a while to kind of get into a groove, but once it did, it became huge and just really the stuff of legend. Yeah. And when you think about it, how many people were really watching Saturday at 11:30? But the people that did watch, they wrote about it and they started their own TV show.
That's right. Okay, now we just gotta stand here while the credits roll in.
Yeah.
Someone that plays music, right?
Are we out? This episode brought to you by Evelyn Woodski's Slow Reading Course. This episode also brought to you by what? We're out of time?
This might have been the season finale, but remember, we'll be back soon with the Batty Awards. More bonus episodes, and after that, season 6.
Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.